YouTube, we're here again. So we just watched a casual geographic video on the last video. This one is going to be by Darby Valentine. It's going to be the history of the Ouija board. Now, for those who don't know, I do practice studying the occult, practice witchcraft. I don't use Ouija boards for obvious reasons. If you don't know what the obvious reasons are, I'm just going to explain them real quick. They are kind of a gateway to the dead, and you don't know exactly who you're talking to when you're using one of these. And if you don't end the ritual properly, you can have spirits use that as a doorway to invade your home. And most of the time, those spirits that want to invade your home are malicious. If you don't believe in this stuff, totally fine. But I'm just explaining for the sake of understanding why I don't use them as a practitioner of witchcraft. But anyway, we're going to get into this. Grab your popcorn, grab your spooky pajamas, and let's jump in the video.
Speaking to the dead, or at least attempting to, is an act that's been around since the dawn of time. Those not being able to move past their grief, or those that wish to cross the thin veil.
Torpedoes are worse than eels because they will shock you with about the same strength, while you're paralyzed, they will spur you. Oh, okay, that makes sense. For context, YouTube, this is pertaining to the last video where we were talking about dangerous fish. Chad is informing me about torpedoes, because I did not know about them.
Veil of this life to the next via communication. But somehow a necromancy tool would become a best-selling children's story and a pop culture symbol with a backstory just as mysterious as its use.
I do want to say, I don't know why. I guess it's just because of the novelty, but Spencer's, of all places, sells Ouija boards. And mind you, the game rating is 8 years old and up. I find that so weird. Necromancy is already known. Yeah, I know.
This is the complete history of the Ouija board. Believe it or not, Ouija boards were originally seen as a very wholesome, fun pastime activity, never anything negative or associated with the devil. That was until one super iconic horror film, along with people blaming murder onto the board. But to start the conversation of how a Ouija board was born, we must first look to automatic writing. If you've ever seen on shows or videos of people channeling ghosts onto paper and pen, that is automatic writing. Sometimes the spirit will use the tool and write out complete words or phrases, or they will use the person as the conduit who's squibbling, and then they will verbally say whatever the ghost is.
Wait until they find out about mass necromancy or long necromancy. Yeah, there's plenty of passive witchcraft that dabble in that. I've done the automatic writing thing back when I was really, tapping into demonology and stuff like that. I haven't seen any medical papers on it. Yeah, you're not going to find very many medical papers, but most occultists kind of know about that.
Telling them. This takes us to China in the Ming Dynasty, where Fuji, or known as planchette writing, was created. In this form of divination, the user will use a planchette to guide a stick writing Chinese characters in sand
Dynasty.
or the ashes of incense. And this is still a common practice that's found in certain sects of Taoism. I find it important to bring this up due to the fact that this was the first usage of spirits talking via a planchette, which, as you know, is a very key integral part of a Ouija board. Now, talking boards themselves were already very prevalent before the existence of a Ouija board. During the 19th century in America, there was a very large movement referred to as the spiritualist movement.
You find short, dead necromancy in medical papers. Fair enough.
This entire movement focused on two key facts they followed. One being that after death, the person is still in the state of existence and can be contacted by the living, and that the afterlife is a place where the spirits keep evolving and interacting. Now, it might sound a little crazy hearing this, especially since right now America, I think, is kind of in a minor satanic panic revival, but back then...
They are. They truly are.
And spiritualism made sense. Spiritualism at its core follows the Christian or Catholic dogma of the fact that there is afterlife. So for people to partake in this, it was no problem. You would go to a seance on Saturday night with all your friends, do table turnings where everyone put their hands on it and it would shake and freak out, and you would have no problem going to church the next day. Everything added up. It just completely made sense. But that also evolved to how many people were doing it, and that leads to innovation. You can't get 10 people together every other week to hold hands and chant with your candles just to talk and wait for knocks on the door from a ghost. So you needed, like, the text message, the Zoom call of the dead, if you will, if we're comparing it to nowadays. Along with this was just the fact that after the Civil War, there was such a huge chunk of people getting into spiritualism because of how many people passed during the war, that mediums and spiritualists was a full-time gig. It was actually seen as like a social status, especially back in Hollywood, if you're like...
And like, there are plenty of mediums out there today. When I was a kid, I was a medium, but as I got older, you know, they say you lose those supernatural gifts as you get older. Now, I'm just kind of clairvoyant and clairaudient. Like, it's not the same thing as actually 100% being able to see the dead around you, or to see, you know, any kind of spirit around you. Clairvoyance is like minor sight. Indigo children, yeah. Definitely.
Oh, this is my medium. To have a medium on payroll to just sit there and do ghost and parlor tricks for you was a status symbol. This is how ingrained spirit...
Is that term still used? In some circles, yes, indigo children is still used. That's what I have read. In some circles, but it's not near as common as it used to be.
Spiritualism became into America and into the everyday home. And with it becoming this type of career path you could take, and again, just something socially accessible, there became education on it. There were whole people doing courses and classes, and this actually led to a spiritualist camp where we would see the mass spread of the use of talking boards. In 1886, the fledgling Associated Press reported on a new phenomenon taking over the spiritualist camp, specifically in Ohio, the talking board. It was, at its very core nature, a Ouija board, with letters, numbers, a vaguely planchette-esque device to point to them. This article about the talking board spread around, and eventually there would be someone who would know, hey, we need to profit on this. And that would be a man named Charles, who lived in Baltimore, and by 1890 he would gather 4 investors to start the production of the Ouija board, which...
The Ouija board is now mass manufactured by Hasbro, of all companies. Which I think is kind of weird, considering that it's considered a toy now. It's not a toy. Like, people need to stop acting like it is.
Didn't have its name yet. According to Robert Murch, the frontrunner, lead historian on everything involving Ouija and talking boards in general, we would not know almost any of this history without him, because he was the one that went out and went, why does no one know where this came from? And he went out and sought all this information. So quite literally nothing about this video or any history of the Ouija board probably really wouldn't be around if it wasn't for Robert. But
I do want to say thank you, Robert, for giving us that history, because honestly, this is new to me too. I knew what it was used for in the modern day, but I didn't know like the history of it. So this gives me kind of some insight too as an occultist.
After they got the investments from everyone and everyone was in on this idea of doing their talking board, they needed to come up with a name. Well, actually, one of the investors, who was an attorney's sister-in-law, happened to be a very strong medium, Helen Peters. The story goes that sitting around the table, they asked the board what they should call it. The name Ouija came through.
I know, but I only know some stuff. Yeah, this gives me a lot more insight, because, you know, I have respect for this item even though I don't use it.
When they asked what that meant, the board replied, "Good luck." Weird and cryptic, but for the fact that Peters acknowledged that she was wearing a locket bearing the picture of a woman, the name Ouija above her head. Well, at least that's how the story goes. It is very possible that Helen actually had a locket of a very famous female author at the time named Oda, O-U-I-D-A, not
Ouida.
O-U-I-J-A, and maybe this was some...
You know what I mean? When you kind of know, but you listen and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Definitely understand that.
Some weird misinterpretation, or like her own way of not just like saying that, but coming up with something. Who knows? The stories that the board was like, that's my name, girl. Good luck. Whatever. So for them to actually get the patent to license and create the Ouija board, they had to prove it worked. This was the fundamental part of this whole situation, was they had to prove that it worked. So they went to the patent's office, and the officer there said if the Ouija board could spell out his name, he would say it works, and it would grant them the patent due to the fact that there's no reason they should know his name. Other fact that our investing attorney was a patent attorney. Regardless, the Ouija board did correctly spell out the officer's name, freaked him out, so he was like, oh my god, it works, like, yeah, you can have a patent. Just totally the ghost. Not that the one guy was straight up an attorney for patents, but hey, that's between the ghosts. With this being able to prove that it works, though, believe it or not, the original patent, and honestly, almost every iteration for years to come, had completely no instructions on how to use a Ouija board. I know
the old concepts and blueprints are really cool. One of them looked like the planchette looked like a magnifying glass.
As everyone knows, always say goodbye. There's a handful of rules that have kind of just came as a culture around Ouija boards, and they're so contradictory. I went looking because I was like, I personally, when I've played with a Ouija board, which, God, it has been minimum a decade since I've touched one of those, we had weird rules that I found out I feel like no one else had, where, first off, always say goodbye. But in particular, when I played with friends, we, had to do, 3 circles.
That's what I was taught, too. You had to do 3 circles, and you had to do them clockwise,
to warm up the board, I guess, and then before we went to say goodbye, we did 3 circles counterclockwise and then said goodbye.
See, I didn't know about the 3 circles counterclockwise, but I know that most people around here that use one, they do 3 circles clockwise, they introduce themselves, and then they ask if anyone is present in the room. Then for the closing, they thank the spirit, and then they say goodbye. That's all that I knew from understanding from other occultists in the South who actually use them.
But I read that people are never do it in your house. And the other ones are it's whatever. Never do it alone. No, you can do it alone. It's fine. Never light candles. No, if you light black candles, it's actually good. Negative energy, yada, yada. I will say, everyone's do not do it in a cemetery. So, don't do it in a cemetery. There's also the very famous Ouija demon Zozo, which I will get to later, that,
I don't know if that's an actual demon. I've never seen people... Fuck, it's past 5 a.m. Code, if you want to go to bed. It's fine. You're not obligated to stay up just because I'm streaming. But I've never seen Zozo. I've heard of Zozo. I really think that that's just a legend, and that it was a fake name that a being might have actually given, because there are trickster demons that lie about who they are. That's a whole thing. Also, no disrespect if it is the actual name of a demon, but if it's not, Zozo is such a corny name.
Zach Baggins brought so much fame to, and that involves your Ouija board just doing crazy infinity loops on each other, but like I said, we'll get back to that.
I fucking hate Zach Baggins. He put a lot of the ghost hunting and, witchcraft community to shame for clout.
Same month they received the patent in 1891, the first advertises started going out for the Ouija board, the mystical talking board. And just within the next year, business would boom, from going from their one operating factory in Baltimore to 2 in Baltimore, 2 in New York, 2 in Chicago, and 1 in London. Following this immediate success of business, though, Kernard, who was the man who came up with the idea, essentially, and Bond, the patent attorney investor, whose sister-in-law actually named the board, were both out. Citing money problems, people, money changes things. There was never really an explicit answer other than, obviously, money started making arguments happening. Weirdly enough, following...
Money always causes problems.
This, there was a man named William Fold who started working as an employee and became a stockholder into the company, and for a long time was wrongfully addressed as the creator of the Ouija board. Specifically, the New York Times put in his obituary he was the creator of the Ouija board, even though that is absolutely not the case. This man, who was just an employee, then became a stockholder, to be fair, was running almost the entire company. That in 1898, with the blessing of one of the last original investors and the majority shareholder, he made the exclusive rights to the board. After this, it was just booming business for William, and obviously intense frustration and anger by these original investors who stepped out, with the squabbling publicly in the papers, going back and forth, kind of being like, I made the board, no, I made the board, no, I invented the Ouija board. Just genuinely fighting publicly in the papers, because that's like kind of what you did back in the day. They even tried launching their own competitor boards to the Ouija board, but they obviously failed, as Ouija quickly established itself as the mystical talking board.
And man, these people were having like press forms of fucking dogfights out here.
Even to this day, it's been over 120 years since this invention. No one has ever come close to having the notoriety or the sales of the Ouija board. And in 1919, that last investor who gave the blessing for William to be the only manufacturer of it, he just sold the entire company and everything outright to him for $1, which was a lot more money back then, but to be fair, it was less than the cost of a singular board. And freakily enough, William would actually die in a very odd accident on the roof of a building that he was told to build by the Ouija board, and he passed in the New York Times wrongfully because he was the owner of Ouija, and they'd been fighting publicly of like who made it. He was credited for making the Ouija board for years, but it was actually Charles Kennard and then these like 4 investors, which you could say they invented it. They monetized on the idea of a talking board, let's be real. I do want to just mention, because we talked about rival boards, and I was a teenage Thelemite, Aleister Crowley loved the Ouija board. He like sung its praises. He thought if you knew...
Aleister Crowley is the most controversial occultist, next to... I can't say Anton LaVey was an occultist, but at the same time, he kind of was, because even though the Church of Satan was so against magic, he did use magic.
Knew how to use it correctly, like it was a great tool, a great conduit, and he himself, we have letters of him saying like he wanted to make his own version of a talking board. Unfortunately, never came to fruition, but like, can you imagine how gaudy, intense, intricate, over the top, like, Aleister Crowley would have been like, you have to do this entire ritual, like, in cloaks to, like, get a Ouija board to work. I truly wish we would have, like, the blueprints of what he wanted, but just imagine how crazy that would have been. Yeah. The board's immediate success, and now more than 120 years later, standing legacy, showed that it had tapped into a perfectly odd niche place in the American home. It was advertised as a conduit to the dead, as well as a family-friendly fun pastime with the edge of the otherworldly being. This actually led to the biggest, like, hater of Ouija boards to be spiritualists and mediums, kind of because it took their job.
Like the Guardia! They took your job! They took your job too!
Why would you go pay to see a spiritualist or a medium if you could just crack open a Ouija board at home? And back then, like I said, there's no rules to this thing. You could just mess around with it and just summon and talk to whoever, however you wanted, whenever you wanted. So, spiritualists vehemently hated them and have been giving it a bad rep since the first day. And of course, now the reps kind of changed more to the evil edge. But at first, they were just like, like, you don't need that thing, man.
If people can use it in a safe way, I think that it is a good tool. But the problem is that there's so much negative energy attached to it now that it essentially has become taboo to use one. And, I would like to be safe. I made my own when I first started as, on the path of Satanism. Like, I made my own, and it worked, You don't have to have an official one, as long as that intention is there. But I did not want to, I was living with my grandparents, so I didn't want to invite bad energy into their home. I was already working with demons, and I know that was rough enough, because I had to keep it a secret. I was raised Mormon, for those who don't know. So I had to keep it a secret that I was working with demons, but making my own Ouija board was a big mistake as a beginner. I worked with blood magic as a beginner too, which you're really not supposed to do.
But of course, it wasn't always sunshine and rainbows for the Ouija board, because how could it be when you're a conduit of the devil, in a way at least? And that would lead us to murders. They would blame murders on Ouija boards, because how easy is it to be like, the ghost told me to do it? And to be fair, there's a patent saying that technically the thing works. The earliest one I can find is from 1930, and it is a very scandalous love triangle murder.
Oh,
in March
Jesus.
of 1930, I am so sorry. I literally tried looking up how to pronounce this name and I can't. Here's the name.
Clothild Marchland.
Marchand, the wife of a New York sculptor, Henry, answered a knock at her door, where she was met with a hammer to the skull, and when the blows didn't prove fatal, a chloroform-soaked rag was stuffed down her throat. Well, why the hell would that happen? Well, elsewhere happening, there were two women with their hands on a planchette on top of a Ouija board together. Nancy Bowen, a tribal heroer, and a friend of Cloth-Eyed Lila Jimerson. Nancy's husband had been recently murdered, so these two women took to the Ouija board to figure out who did it. And the Ouija board provided them, spelling out they did it and a full home address. So this led to Nancy knocking on the door of this address that belonged to Cloth-Eyed and sticking a hammer into the innocent woman's skull on the basis that a Ouija board told her that it killed her husband. Now, why the hell would ghosts tell her that this innocent woman killed her husband? Because it wasn't ghosts. It was Lila, the other woman on the Ouija board. And why would she want to kill her friend? Well, because she was having an affair with her husband. And she thought, boy, oh boy, this lady's in the way of me being with him, so how can I get rid of him? I'll see the Ouija board tells my friend that she killed her husband, and then I can get her husband, and just get your own husband. Go get your own husband. This is the 30s. I don't think it was that hard. Obviously, Jimerson's plot didn't go as planned because we're here discussing it today, but unfortunately, neither of the women ever had any real consequences for this action. During the trial, too, Henry himself said he had too many lovers to count and couldn't really recall if he was ever with Lila at all, and would go on to marry his dead wife's 18-year-old niece.
What the fuck?
Wish the Ouija board would have told you that, huh?
What the fuck? Excuse me? What is wrong with people?
Everything.
Jimerson was acquitted after 2 separate trials, and Nancy would end up just serving a singular year in prison for killing a completely innocent woman on the basis that the Ouija board told her to do it. But part of that is the perfect recipe of wanting to believe. Everyone wants to believe in something, or even just have some biased confirmation of like, oh, okay, well, yes, I have to be right. This has to be true because this thing's telling me it's true. That leads to the Ouija board skyrocketing always in uncertain times. More specifically, like spiritualism rising after the Civil War, and the second spike happening after World War I, and the full swing of Prohibition. And the early approaching Great Depression, you couldn't keep Ouija boards on the shelf. To the point that it was during the Great Depression, the Fold Company had to open new factories to meet demand for the boards. Over 5 months in 1944, a single New York department store sold 50,000 Ouija boards.
Jesus.
Our next very significant spike is in 1967, just 2 years after the Parker brothers would acquire the licensing right from the Fold Company, and this is the year that we saw more American troops go off to Vietnam, counterculture hippie movement happening over in San Fran. There was a desperate, dire need for a higher power to be there for people and to confirm whatever they needed, and the Ouija board was the easiest, cheapest, convenient option for confirmation. Now, as I stated earlier, the Ouija board was never this evil entity. There was never devilish connotations with it. It was seen as comical, goofy even after a while. Like many TV shows would just have seance episodes like I Love Lucy, where they get everyone together and use a Ouija board, and it's kooky and it's funny and everyone laughs. So
Fair enough.
happened? What made the Ouija evil? What genuinely flipped it on its side? Fortunately, it is so very clear and easy to point a finger at exactly what happened. And that finger is pointing straight at William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist.
Fair enough. You know what? Fair enough. The Exorcist caused mass hysteria for a lot of different spiritual aspects.
As I'm sure you're familiar with, the demon Pazuzu is able to get to Regan due to the fact that she played with a Ouija board. And if you remember from my Exorcist video, The Exorcist, due to its timing and premiere, was one of the highest ever grossing films ever. So the amount of people that saw this evil, negative connotation of the Ouija board knew new bounds. And for them to go and tell people to be like, oh no, don't let your kids play with the Ouija board. Why? Well, I just saw this movie, The Exorcist. It's based on a true story. This little girl got possessed. No, Ouija boards are bad. Ouija boards are the devil. No one should have Ouija boards. It started making constant appearances in horror media and culture at the time, and people flipped the script on it. People immediately turned their back on the Ouija board. Just people who were, say, a decade or two before at their homie's house, doing a seance, messing with stuff, and then going to church the next day. Because it was confirmation. It wasn't a devil tool, it wasn't evil. But
No.
here they were, turning their back on it, saying that's exactly what it was. But what is religion without hypocrisy? The Parker brothers, later turning into Hasbro, was still selling countless
She's got a point. What is religion without hypocrisy? There's no hate like Christian love.
hundreds and thousands of the Ouija board, but obviously the connotation of the board changed. People were not buying this to talk to their dead cousin or to just keep the kids busy. People were buying this on the basis of a spooky, scary thing, like we're gonna talk to ghosts, or what if a demon comes out? So they were still making their money, and people were still consuming Ouija boards. It just now had this very negative connotation around it, and it would continue to. This Ouija board to this day is seen as, you know, ooky, spooky, kooky, don't mess with that, hoodoo-doo-doo, whatever, you know. This unfortunately was the pinnacle changing point. The Exorcist made Ouija evil, which is kind of badass. And to be fair, Hasbro kind of embraced it completely. They even did that licensed Ouija horror movie. I didn't watch it. I heard it sucked, but they totally did it.
Ouija is ass. The Ouija movie is ass. I'm sorry, it is.
You don't know that. You don't know that.
I've watched it. It's ass.
Why? Because it's not scary as you would like.
It's so fucking corny, and there are so many fucking plot holes in that fucking movie.
That's how all horror movies go.
No. People can tell a good story in a horror movie. The Exorcist didn't have that many plot holes. No. Paranormal Activity used a Ouija board in their movie. Don't get me wrong, the first one was good, but it didn't age well. Does that make sense? The new ones, all the new ones, just absolutely suck. They're literally jump scare bait. I'm sorry.
Is that not what a horror movie is?
No! There are different subgenres of horror.
They all got the scare.
No, they don't.
They all scare.
Scares, yeah, but jump scares are specific, they're a specific type of scare.
How do you see a horror movie that doesn't have a jump scare?
I have. Seen plenty.
Name 3.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Saw, the first one, fucking, The Boy, Midsummer, The House that Jack Built, Antichrist, motherfucking Cannibal Holocaust, Green Inferno, Hostel, Hellboy.
What you say?
Is that Hellboy?
I wouldn't consider that a horror.
It is. Guillermo del Toro made the monsters for it.
I wouldn't consider the first Hellboy a horror.
Okay, the first one maybe not. The second one definitely.
What? The golden what you call it?
Yeah. There's a horror movie director that made the monsters for it and helped set up the plot for it. Guillermo del Toro. I'm telling you.
What?
I'm telling you.
Well, just because a horror movie director worked on it doesn't mean it's horror.
It's still considered horror.
Rotten Tomatoes.
No, by its genre. There are plenty of horror movies without jump scares, babe.
What are you watching?
The History of the Ouija Board.
Oh, Jesus. Why couldn't you just think of more casualty?
Because I finished the video.
For the others. You gotta-
I believe it revolves around the same situation of a demon, but as I mentioned earlier, the Ouija board has its own demon. The demon Zozo, which, if you're familiar with the trash reality television show Ghost Adventures, like I myself am unfortunately an avid fan of, then you've heard of Zozo.
I used to be a fan until, like, the first time I watched Ghost Adventures, I watched the Demon House movie because they released it on YouTube. And for a while, I thought that shit was real. Because it looked real. But then I found out that Zach Bagans was just faking shit for clout and lying to everybody.
Before, but if you haven't, let me just give you a little brief rundown. Zozo is a demon that will contact you through the board, attempting to possess you. You'll know it's him if your planchette begins to do constant infinity loops, or side-to-side arches resembling a rainbow, even beginning to spell out his name, Zozo, or one of his aliases, Zaza, Ma, Zoza, and Abacus, which I haven't looked at the Lesser Key of Solomon in a minute, but I feel like Abacus is like a whole separate demon, but you'll find countless recants online of people telling their own horrific experiences with Zozo. They did the whole episode of Ghost Adventure.
If Zozo is going to be an alias to anything, I would think it would be closer to Pazuzu. But even then, Pazuzu is its own thing. Like, what the fuck is this fucking demon thing?
Which I've now mentioned to you a bunch, but I argue it's one of the most iconic episodes of Ghost Adventures. There's a handful. If you're into Ghost Adventures, like, there's like a top 10, like, Bob Mackey and, like, you know, Zozo. This was a very prolific Ghost Adventures episode, and it would continue anytime a Ouija board's brought up. He's brought up. I've done the Zach Bagans Haunted Museum in Vegas, like, twice now, and, they really spoon feed you Zozo content. And, like I said, if you go online and look at people in, like, Ouija forums talking about stuff, people will be like, oh, yeah, this happened with Zozo.
Can you burn a Ouija board?
Zada, like... Zozo's very prevalent and around. The issue with that is the fact that the name Zozo never existed in connotation of demons until the 19th century. In the book La Dictionnaire Infernal, which is essentially a guide to the unholy kind of like a newer Lesser Key of Solomon.
It means the dictionary, the Infernal Dictionary. I have this book.
In this, demons are presented as a very real threat. They are treated as real, and you should be scared of them. Demons, that is. Not Zozo. Zozo is mentioned in this book as the reference to what someone who is faking a possession will say the name is. And eventually, I believe the person's like jailed or whatever for faking possession. Zozo is not referred to as a demon. So how is he getting through the board? How is he talking to people?
It's fake.
This all comes down to posts that were made in 2009. Urban legends circulated the rounds online because a man named Darren Evans posted on the site True Ghost Tales. Here, he warned the dangers of the Ouija board, saying the demon Zozo was ruining his life. His relationships, he really weirdly focused on, like, that Zozo was, like, wrecking his love life with, like, these really cool women. Like, I'm not even, like, exaggerating it at all. But he came online to tell people, be fearful of Zozo. Don't play with the Ouija board. It will mess with you. And like anyone who lies on the internet, the story kept changing. Originally, he found this Ouija board and it was carved Zozo on the back. And then eventually, where it's supposed to say Ouija on the board, it said Zozo. And it's just a guy lying on the internet. But I know I'm telling you this, and I'm sure someone's gonna comment down below that they had an interaction with Zozo. And listen, I don't treat black and white objects about spiritualism, demons, the ghosts, the beyond. I'm very gray in it. I'm open to the idea. Do you know how fun it would be if demons are real? I would love that. I would love if ghosts and demons are real. So I'm not gonna close the door on them.
I totally understand that. Totally understand that. Not everybody is going to be like, oh, demons aren't real or demons are real. You know, that's understandable. You know, as somebody who works with them, I get it. I get it. You know?
I'm not saying or invalidating anyone's experiences, but I will tell you, Zozo was made up. Okay? Look at me.
I'm looking.
You can comment down below. You can tell me I'm wrong. You can tell me Zozo ate your mom. I'm just telling you, as someone who's very with the occult and like all of that, no. But even with this, you cannot invalidate people's experiences. There's a whole scientific study people have around the Ouija board and how it can actually show how people react. And like, there was even a test at one point where they had people in a room, in a separate room where there was like another person, and they would say,
huh?
Hop in the shower.
Okay. I love you.
the robot that was in the room with the one individual would like just do the other person's movements, and it would like, you know, see if people are going to be inclined to like put the blame on someone else. I don't know how to say it, but I'll be real, the study wasn't super thorough. They didn't really get anything out of it. But there is some sort of science, not about ghosts, but about individuals and how they treat and use a Ouija board. So there's something with that. You can't invalidate how people feel sometimes. You can totally say like ghosts aren't real and stuff, but you know, it's a good time. My dream, no one will have seances with me. My dream is to just...
Darby, you're probably never gonna see this fucking video. But if you're, I don't know if you're a tattoo artist, I don't know if you're just, you know, whatever. If you are and you ever have a tattoo expo in Texas, motherfucker, I will come do a seance with you. I promise you that. Nobody does this shit with me either.
Just get a bunch of people and host a good old Vincent Price style seance. That is like, that's my goal for my birthday next year. Obviously, Ouija boards are still around, and I think they will always be around. And honestly, I am waiting for a spike because we are in very uncertain and unprecedented times, and this is the perfect time for the spike of the Ouija. I tried looking, I could not see like sale wise, but they got them at $5 Below, so if that says anything, I don't know. But
and Spencer's,
they've come full circle. You can now buy a branded The Exorcist Ouija board. So from turning from a family fun time to a literal conduit of the devil, the Ouija board's history is very interesting, fast, and fascinating. And that was the history of the Ouija board, or at least as much as I'm telling you today, because I didn't think we want to go through the clerical parts of the paperwork for filing it. Have you ever played with a Ouija board? Have any creepy experiences? Have any boring experiences? Let me know down below. I love talking Ouija. I love the occult. I love spiritual stuff. I think it's just fun. I
messing about with a quiche board.
don't want to take any of this stuff like super serious. Like, it's just fun. I like to have fun. I think it is so boring to think there's no aliens or ghosts. So, you know, I love to live in the gray area. I know most people don't. Everyone loves everything being black and white. But let's talk ghosts in the comment down below. And if you watched all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I think by the time I upload this, I'm going to be at like 8K. So that is like phenomenal, because I think...
We love that for you, Darby. I'm going to let you do your thing. Thank you for teaching us about the history of the Ouija board. You are at 9.7K, ma'am. So you're doing good for yourself. Y'all check out Darby Valentine. She's got some good shit. I love her history on Hellraiser. It's really good. So yeah. YouTube, thank you all so much for watching. Like it if you like it. Dislike it if you dislike it. Give me criticism in the comments below. Constructive or destructive, I'll take it. Try our merch, it's going to be in the comments, and so is our Discord. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.